Shadow on the Sward, a Warhammer novel. They took our names under a slate sky that hummed with the ache of a coming storm. A table, a scribal servitor with its face embalmed beneath stained vellum, an officer with 2 new brass, and a data slate with a cracked corner, state name and Hab district. Ivo Taran, sub-level 9, Spindle Tenement, South Rafter. He nodded without looking up. His gloved thumb smeared a line of ink. Planetary Defence, 6th Muster. Have you any prior experience with a las weapon? Yes, I said, and the lie tasted like dust. I had handled one once, when the Hab Block's custodian found an old, civi-legal varmint laser in a locker seized from a debtor. We all took turns aiming it down the alley and whispering pew. It never fired, but I knew enough to carry the lie past the officer's bored gaze. He tapped once, hard, like a nail finding wood. Next. They moved us into a cage of fences and drilled us until our bones complained. The sergeant who barked orders had the face of a man who had forgotten what laughing is for. His name was Grem Halvan, and he swore at us with the fluency of prayer. We wore flak that had seen other people sweat. We learned to snap-charge a laspack in the rain. We spent hours with our chins tucked into our collars while sirens in the distance wound their endless skein, a sound like metal asking for mercy. At night, the sky did not hold. It seethed, stars smeared into grease. The old folk in the cantonment, cooks and drivers and auger techs, stared up at the black and did not say the words "shadow in the warp," but they spoke in smaller words and crossed themselves when they thought no one saw. The first time I heard it, I thought it was a memory of the manufacturer's ceiling fans, a faint burr around the ear, too high to be sound and too raw to be thought. Later, when the wind died and the camp was a box of sleeping chests, it came again, under everything. Not a voice, but the suggestion of one, like a finger drawing a line on the surface of my mind and leaving no mark you could point to afterward. I rolled onto my side and pressed my palms to my eyes until light blossomed red behind my lids. It only made the not voice clearer. I lay there and pretended I didn't understand what it meant. On the 3rd day, we marched. The 6th muster was not marching to the front. They told us that, often, as if repetition could hoist the lie into truth. Our duty, to guard an entrance to an underground facility some kilometers from the main hikestack. It had been a mining access in the days when this continent punched ore from the crust like a man with a grudge. Now it had a different designation, immaculately vague. There were Munitorum crates in the yard. There were machine shrine cod marks above the door. There were vox antennae stubbled over the low hills like stubble on a jaw clenched against pain. Halvan took the point, because Halvan always took the point. Kessa and Dawn walked 6 meters apart with the squad auspex between them, trading it back and forth without talking. Malco carried the flamer like a guilty secret. Jory, who had a laugh like broken glass and a habit of rubbing his thumb over the aquila stamped into his dog tag, fell in beside me. The lasgun was correct in his hands. He looked like someone raised to carry one. "First deployment?" he asked without glancing. "First one above ground," I said. "Keep your pack high and your head low. Is that a soldier's wisdom?" It's wisdom either way. The facility rose out of the earth like a tooth. Concrete skin, iron mouth. Tech adepts in rust robes stood at the threshold and blinked mechanical eyes at us. Their voices came filtered, like they were speaking through fans. "You will secure the perimeter at 150-meter intervals and maintain line of sight with the watch bastions. The inner sanctum is not to be entered. The inner sanctum is not to be entered." We nodded. We took our places. The wind smelled of rain and metal and something green you could not name, like grain before it has a chance to be a promise. The Voxnet was a choir of distant voices pushed through cloth, other squads reporting positions, command announcing ration allotments, someone swearing softly because they had died twice in the reg sim, and now it was doing that thing where the horizon tilted a fraction of a degree to the left. Every time I tried to settle into the repetition of a guard watch, the not voice surged up like surf licking a rock and left me raw. "It's normal," Jory said, and I realized I'd been staring. That feeling, the priests call it the Emperor's warning, means you're paying attention. Does it go away? He looked out across the plains. They were not flat. They had the posture of a sleeping animal, all long tension and pockets of shadow. No, he said. You just get used to carrying it." We would say afterward that the first contact at Access 10 happened on the 5th day, when the sun chewed through the cloud belt at last and drew a thin vein of shining across the lip of the world. But that's an afterword you earn. At the time, there was nothing to mark the hour except the way the wind went still and took its smell with it. The auspex wobbled. Kessa hit it with her palm as if it had said something unkind. "Interference," she grunted into the vox. "Local, could be electrical, could be." Her words broke apart, not in my ear, in my head. They dissolved like a tablet in water and left only the taste of iron. The first of them came over the low wall of rock, as if the earth had been storing them for us and had finally become bored with restraint. It was as tall as my chest, and its legs moved like knives thinking they were legs. Chitin and sinew, but that makes it sound dead, like a carcass with hinges. This was alive with a precision that made my skin try to climb off me. More of hooked teeth set in a wedge of a head, talons scything from forelimbs, the edges rippling with toxins that made the air skate away from them. Malco hissed a word that might have been Emperor and loosed the flamer. Fire collapsed on the creature. The stench as it burned was a new thing. You think you know the dictionary. Then you smell Tyranid ichor on fire and discover an entry with no letters in it. Kessa and Dawn started the volley. Lastfire stitched red lines across the nearest bodies. That would have been enough for vermin or seditious men. It was not enough for this. The shots wounded. They did not slow. Halvan roared. We roared back because you can build bravery out of noise sometimes for long enough to make a difference. "The Gaunts!" Someone said the name on the vox. A rumor cutting through static hit the line like an idea hitting a weak mind, and we went down under it. In the first 3 breaths, I watched Kessa's hand come off at the wrist. In the next 2, I watched Dawn try to staunch a wound in a thing that did not bleed in any way he could cope with, and then die with his mouth open as if to argue. Malco's flamer belched once, twice, sputtered, and went dark. Jory planted his boots and fired, and then something fast, as a lie took him in the throat, and he made a sound like surprise, and then there was only me and Halvan and the edge of the world. He was a wall. He was 10 years of regiment in the shape of a man. He took one down with a boot heel, and another with a shot that put a hole the size of a fist through the thing's chest. He turned. He drew breath to tell me to live, and out of the loose skein of movement another shape resolved. A longer head, a thicker carapace, eyes that seemed like they might know more. Halvan went forward like someone confronting an old debt. The bigger beast's talon whispered through him, and he folded into himself, and there was nothing left of him but a pile of khaki and a rolled-up sleeve showing a skull tattooed on his forearm. I did not run. If anyone later said I did, it's because the mind hates empty spaces. It furnishes them with stories. What I did was something else. I lifted my lasgun, and the knot voice rose with me and became a rope in my blood. Time went thin, like glass stretched. Everything else stayed the same, but I had more of it. The chitter and screech was far away. My breath was near. The barrel of my gun was near. In that long second, I knew where to put the shot and where to put my foot and how not to drink the poison being offered to my ears. I saw the bigger beast step to the side before it stepped, so when I fired, the beam lanced into the seam beneath its armored plate rather than glancing off. It squealed a sound that felt like thorns pushed through my memories and reeled, and I don't remember the rest except how it died was like a puzzle unknotted and how my hands shook afterward as if they had done something they knew they should not. Then the rope cut. The second lost its stretch. There were more of them, but something high and far and sour went through the air, and they pulled back like their bodies had been jerked by a string attached to a distant hand. They left trails of slime that smoked where it touched rock. What? They moved away in the same silence the wind had left behind. I stood in the wreck of my squad. The priest at muster had told us the Emperor watches. I wondered, in that moment, whether he had closed his eyes. I made a mark for each of them because there should be marks. The butt of my lasgun jittered against the stone. Kessa, Dawn, Malco, Halvan, Jory. I did not say the names out loud because there are names you speak only once. I took their tags because that's what you do, and I did not bury them because the ground didn't feel like ours anymore. The long walk back to camp had an hour in it that broke off and went missing. I remember starting it with the weight of 5 tags against my heart, and then I remember the camp gate with its blessedly ugly razor wire and the Vox checkpoint with its attendant private who had acne and eyes like a kicked dog. Between those points was the moment where my knees gave out, and I learned that there is a way to crawl while keeping your rifle pointed away from your own face. I stopped twice because the not voice spilled into something like a tune, sweet as the singing of a child who has never been taught the right words, and I had to sit and make it stop. They pulled me into the light. They looked at my boots and my hands and the fact that I was alone. A murmur ran through the camp, the kind that starts in a ribcage and doesn't need air. I heard the words, thrown careless, stuck like burrs, runner, scared, left them. None of them belonged to a face I knew well. That didn't make them way less. The commissar watched me with eyes that wanted to be knives but had been taught to be laws. He said nothing then. He would say plenty later if given the option. I was grateful for the reprieve. They took me to the commander. Captain Velen had grey hair cut to regulation and the kind of stillness that you see in a statue carved to watch over a tomb. His office smelled of oil and parchment. There was a shrine to the emperor on the shelf and a folded flag and a piece of armor with a splashed burn through it, big as a plate. He let the silence do most of the work before he said, "Sit." I did not, until he pointed to the chair. I heard my own breath. I heard, under it, other things I did not want to hear. "You are Evo Taran," he said. "6th muster, assigned to Access 10 under Sergeant Halvan." "Yes, sir. You are the only one who has returned." "Yes, sir. If I walked you back out there, would I find a field of bodies and blackened ground?" "Yes, sir. Will I find you among them if I look hard enough?" "No, sir." Something like a smile ghosted his mouth, but it was not the kind you give because something is funny. "Good," he said. "How many?" 7 of the small ones, 1 of the larger. We killed at least 4. My voice caught on the number and had to be hauled across. It got Halvan. It got all of them. "Did Halvan die facing the enemy?" "Yes, sir." He looked at the scratched metal of the desk as if expecting more answers to be written there. "The Vox reported interference before you went quiet." "Yes." "Your flamer jammed." "Yes." "You did not run." Silence. He didn't ask it as a question. He watched me. He wasn't measuring my stutter, but everything else. How my shoulders sat, whether my hands made fists when they didn't know what else to be, whether I looked at the floor like I was courting it. "No," I said finally. He nodded. He gestured. An aide brought him a canteen. He pushed it across the desk to me. I did not take it until he kept pushing, until I had to or it would fall. The water didn't taste like anything. I didn't trust it until it was gone. "You survived your first engagement," Velen said, more to the room than to me, "and everyone who is tired enough to be cruel decides they know why." He looked at me. "Do you know why?" "No, sir," I said, and the word that wanted to come out instead was not a word anyone should utter here. Sometimes the answer is that you were faster. Sometimes it is because you are unremarkable enough not to be noticed when the first cut comes. Sometimes because you are excellent, and you will make a career of outliving men better than you. He paused. Sometimes because the Emperor required it. A beat, and sometimes other reasons. Reasons that would trouble a priest. The rope tugged in my blood. The not voice pressed its cheek to the inside of my skull and whispered something like a lullaby again, only there were knives in it if you listened. I kept my face still. "I believe you did not run," he said. "Your last pack is almost spent. Your gloves have residue." He wrinkled his nose very slightly. "Your flak shows spatter in a pattern I have seen too often to mistake. No man runs toward his own vomit to make himself a hero." He sat back. "More importantly, I have need of anyone who will stand a line when it collapses." The words ached, as if something hand-shaped in my chest had found them and squeezed. "Sir, the horde that tested your position was not an army. It was a finger prodding the meat to see where the bones are. They will come again. The bastions need men I can tell to hold without having to lend them my spine." He picked up a stylus and tapped it against the table. "I am short of corporals. You will lead a fire team, 5 troopers. You will show them where to put their feet. You will not let them die stupid." There is a way I could have answered that which would have been poetry. I did not find it. All I found was, "Yes, sir," twice, because sometimes an agreement needs to be hammered in, not sung. On the way out, the commissar caught me with a look that could have been a warning or a promise. It said, "I am counting your steps." It said, "I own a book with a page in it that might have your name." It said, "Pray with sincerity." I saluted as if he were the emperor, and he gave me back nothing. They gave me 4 troopers and a kid with a Vox. Kid because he looked it, not because he was. The war takes that measure and ruins it. Raoul had a calm that only desert towns breed. Sarah had arms like recon cable, tattoos that coiled and vanished under her sleeves. Pelin and Haag were Bastion Guard who had survived 2 deployments by being cynical enough to avoid standing where the big guns point. The Vox kid's name was Mir. He had a habit of touching his headphones when he didn't know where to hold his hands. They looked at the stripe on my sleeve like it was something stuck there by mistake. "We go to Outpost Amber," I told them, overlooking the Sward. "The what?" Haag said. "The grass," I said, and immediately hated that I was the kind of person who tried for poetic names in a place like this. Sarah smiled, a small thing. "Sward's fine," she said. "Better than that patch where we die." We went. Outpost Amber had been welded to the rock by someone who liked their bolts loud. It offered a grand view of the plain rolling down toward the mouth of a wide vale where a river wound like a vein returning to a tired heart. In the vale, something new stained the ground, a freckling of darker green among the old growths that looked soft from a distance and would be anything but up close. Spores drifted, not like snow. Snow is too honest, more like the sky dusting for fingerprints on the earth and finding too many to make sense of. We settled the guns, we checked the arcs. Mir had the Vox dish purring. Raoul found the high point without being told and lay there with his rifle and the look of someone gone away inside himself to a room where he could make the math neat. Pelin told me a story about his 5th grade teacher and a pile of chalk dust that I didn't understand but nodded at because men have to spend words sometimes or they'll break. Haag took a piss over the edge and completed his ritual of ownership. Sarah tuned the auspex until the line steadied. Evening came down like a lid. The sky resumed its smudged hum. Somewhere far behind us, the Bastion guns practiced a cough. Somewhere far ahead, the plane breathed. I walked the parapet and listened. If I tipped my head just so I could hear Althing prayers in the next outpost over, little murmurs like beads turning. If I tilted it the other way, I could hear the not voice that wasn't a voice, a smear of sweetness that had never seen a mouth. It loved us. It loved everything. It wanted to take us apart to know us better and then have that be all we were. I thought about the Emperor burning on his throne of gold, and I set my jaw against the love of a god that was only hunger. "You hear it worse up here, don't you?" Sarah said, coming to stand with me. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Raoul says, "it's the plains. Nothing to break the wind, nothing to catch the sound. Makes a bowl." "It's not the wind," I said, and immediately wished I hadn't. She looked at me long. Neither of us named what we both knew, that men who listened too closely to that not voice sometimes ended their watch wearing cuffs and sometimes never ended their watch at all. "No," she said, like someone answering a different question, "but it has to pass through it to reach you." I nodded, relief, a sudden guilty brightness. Below, the grass, the sward, because I'd said it and now it was ours, shifted in ways grass does not. Velen had been right. That first fight was a finger. This would be a hand. In the vale, something reared up and opened like a mouth that made chimneys. Spore towers. A long line of small, dark forms moved along the river, keeping to its bank as if obeying a rule printed into them when they congregated in whatever hell passes for a womb out there. "We'll be ready," I told the wind. The not voice, my team, myself, the Emperor, if he was listening. "We are ready." Sarah tightened her sling. Raoul's breath slowed to the rhythm of someone who had found the number he needed. Pelin lit a roll-up and let it burn until it hurt his fingers. Mir ran a palm across the Vox dish, the way a man would pet a faithful hound. Haag finished his ritual by spitting into the dark. The not voice stirred, as if at the taste of us, and my skin went bright from the inside out. The rope tugged. The long seconds stretched. I wondered if it would be there when we needed it, and hated that I wondered. It could save me. It had. It might burn me from the inside and leave a shape-shaped ash that the commissar would bless before throwing on a pile. Both things were true. Both futures existed. Both were close. I closed my eyes and saw Halvan's forearm and the skull tattoo and the steadiness in his gaze. I opened my eyes and looked out over a world that wanted to change shape in my mouth. The plains waited. The towers smoked. The night was a hand. The dawn would come sooner than it had any right to. Behind me, someone whispered a prayer. In front of me, the grass moved. Between those, myself, small as a nail, hard enough to hold something together, is struck just right. "Hold," I said to my unit, to the outpost, to the nerve that trembled behind my teeth. "Hold until they break on us. Hold until the bastions wake. Hold until the Emperor's light finds our faces. The rope in my blood thrummed, a string on an instrument ready to sing whether I wanted it to or not. I laid my palm on the stone of the parapet. It felt old and unimpressed with either gods or xenos. Good! I wanted to borrow that indifference. The night exhaled. The first shapes came fast and low. We lifted our guns. The planes swallowed our fear and set the table for war.